I guess we should probably put that qualifier on everything we say. Oh yeah, we're going to review Incredibles 2 only if one of us doesn't pass away.
Welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. You can find us at thenerdspodcast.com, facebook.com/thenerdspodcast. You can follow us on Instagram at the Nerds Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the Nerds Podcast. We have a YouTube page, The Nerds You're Looking For, and you can email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. My name is Tyler Hunt, and I am here with my co-host, as always, Mr. Pat Attack. How's it going, man?
I'm good, man. I'm excited. It's been kind of crazy at work recently. This is kind of our busy season, so I've been working a lot of crazy hours. But the next episode that our audience is going to hear is us at PopCon, so that's always fun.
Yeah, unless one of us dies, we will be there. You'll hear us. You'll see us. It's going to be good stuff.
I guess we should probably put that qualifier on everything we say. Oh yeah, we're going to review Incredibles 2 only if one of us doesn't pass away.
I honestly think that if I were to die horrifically tonight, like 2 weeks, you'd probably figure out what you want to do with the podcast, and you'd probably still review Incredibles 2. So I feel like that's probably
I mean,
at
bet. This point, that ball's rolling already. That's happening. Everybody's waiting for our Incredibles 2 review. So, yeah, I mean, you can't not give the people what they want.
Yeah.
I imagine most people don't listen to you anyways. So
I know you don't. Yeah.
I definitely don't. We proved that already when we were talking off recording. I literally asked you a question you answered like 2 minutes ago. So, yeah, about that. No, I'm really excited about it. It's going to be extra special or weird. I don't know. It depends on how I feel. Because this year, actually, the Saturday, which is the busiest day of PopCon, is actually my 31st birthday. So that should be extra, like I said, special or weird or whatever.
I'm glad that you said that, because otherwise I would have been like laying in the hotel room on my phone on Saturday and would have saw.
Wondering why I'm masturbating?
No, I never wonder about that. No, I would have been looking at Facebook and I would have been like, oh shit, it's his birthday. So good to know.
Yeah, that puts a lot of pressure on you, because my wife's not going to be there. I mean, not like that. I realized as soon as I started saying that I was like putting like sexual pressure on you. That's not it at all. No, that's always going to be there anyways. But
yeah,
no, it's just like now you're the one responsible to make sure that I have a good birthday.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that though. So
I feel like you're going to make it worse.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I'm going to try to make you have a good birthday, and it's going to end up just being a worse day than usual. So, let's see. Yeah. So what are you most looking forward to for PopCon then?
The people on Reddit roasting you on Friday. Well, I'm assuming that we're going to do it on Friday. I don't know. Maybe we'll save it for Saturday.
Well, it's a shame that we're recording live at PopCon on the stage as soon as the con starts Friday.
Yes.
So that's a shame, because if we were recording Saturday, we could have like a whole day's worth of Reddit roasts to read off.
Yeah, that would be kind of fun, but we didn't really plan that out very well. When I say we, I mean, I didn't really plan that out very well. But, we kind of got the time slot that we got. But I'm actually looking forward to a lot of PopCon. It's always a good time. Unfortunately, our friends from the Obsessive Viewer don't have a booth this year, so that's going to be kind of a bummer. This is the first time that we're going to be doing it, not necessarily by ourselves, but without them. I mean, we've kind of made friends because we've gone there every single year, and a lot of the same podcasts go every year. So that should be fun, seeing those people that we only really see once a year. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, and just hanging out. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot of fun. And I mean, at this point, we're PopCon royalty, so I know we're going to get like, a lot of special treatment. They're going to gasp when we walk through the door. Like, they're back again, 5th year in a row. Crazy. All that good stuff. So,
of course. I mean, that's what happens everywhere I go in my own head. But, yeah, I got a new banner, or I should say that we have a new banner, so I'm looking forward to unveiling that. I thought it had gotten stolen, but no, I pulled the trigger. I was a little angry about that. Turns out it didn't get stolen. It just got delivered to the wrong house because apparently the UPS guy had a stroke or something and delivered to the wrong house. So I just got it a day later. Now we have two banners because I yelled at the Vistaprint person and they just sent me another one. And now that I got the first one, now we just have two banners. Vistaprint, if you're listening, I apologize.
you know, I'm just now putting together in my head that like 2 weeks ago you texted me a picture and said, what do you think about this for our new banner? And I thought you meant like our banner on Facebook. I didn't realize that you were physically ordering us a new banner for PopCon.
Yes. So now we have 3 banners because we have the old one that has literally been in my back seat since PopCon last year. And then I have the 2 that I just ordered because I yelled at the Vistaprint person.
Gotcha. Well, that's 2 too many banners. Some people might say 3 too many banners. So,
no, I was actually looking to get one that's a little bit smaller because we do kind of take up a lot of room with our booth and our banner. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to unveiling that. So that should be fun. And I mean, just come visit us. I think we have been talking about this for almost 10 minutes now, and I have failed to mention what booth we're actually at. It's 11:30. So, yeah, check us out at booth 11:30.
Yeah, we'll be there.
All right. So if this is your first episode, we kind of just start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
So I'm going to talk about Action Point.
Okay.
Obviously, I would have preferred to have seen and talked about a movie like Upgrade that came out this weekend, or American Animals, which also came out this week. But unfortunately, this is what I'm stuck with since 1, those movies were not playing in my most local theater, and 2, obviously my wife has a unique taste in movies and made me go see this. So
if you asked me before you started talking whose idea this was to go see this movie, I would have picked Brittany.
Yeah, 100%. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I like the Jackass movies and the TV show quite a bit. Like, I was the target audience for that stuff whenever it was coming out. But this movie is garbage, and I'm struggling to determine what the point of the movie was. It's marketed like it's a Jackass movie, but from what I can tell, the only common denominator it has with Jackass is that Johnny Knoxville and Chris Pontius are in it. So obviously, if you've seen the trailers, you know that this movie is telling a story while featuring quote unquote real stunts. But unfortunately, the story that they're telling through this movie is pretty terrible, and the stunts are not funny like you would, find them funny in Jackass. So, I do want to point out that I don't think there was a single stunt in this movie that is not featured in the promotional material for it. So it's not even that big of a part of a movie, and it seemed like that was like their major selling point. So in case you're not following at home, this movie features a grandfather telling his granddaughter a story about the amusement park he owned in the 70s. And to stay competitive and to stay open, he makes the park crazy and dangerous and offers cheap beer to the kids that come during the summer. And then, of course, hijinks ensue afterwards. And I really think that the feel that this movie was trying to go for was like a throwback 70s comedy, like Animal House or Porky's. But I'm not exaggerating when I say it fails in every way imaginable. Performance-wise, Johnny Knoxville is not a good actor. But you know what makes Johnny Knoxville look like a good actor? Chris Pontius. Chris Pontius, I was kind of happy to see him in this movie because of the nostalgia of Jackass and, enjoying that when I was younger. But he is awful as an actor. There's no reason he should be in this movie. From what I can tell, I don't think he's ever acted before. And it definitely shows in his performance. It's not like they brought him in to do stunts because he doesn't do any in this movie. So I'm not sure what the point was, except for to try to feel like a Jackass ripoff. The movie is 84 minutes long, which includes credits. So like the actual story is probably like 75 minutes long. And that's not long at all, but I was constantly checking my phone to see how much longer there was while I was watching it. It was just boring and it was not funny. What I will say though is a couple weeks ago I talked about Life of the Party. And again, for those keeping score at home, that was another movie I saw because of my wife. I mentioned that movie didn't even make me smile. So I will say that this movie made me laugh once and smile a couple of times. So it wasn't as bad as Life of the Party, but all in all, it was still pretty terrible, and I'm a worse person for seeing it.
That's saying a lot, because you're a pretty bad person.
That's true.
I had no desire to see this movie. Like, there's a lot, like you said, that has come out this week, and to see Action Point, I mean, there was no way. There was no way. I would rather not see a movie this week than to see this movie. It seems like you introduced this movie as kind of saying that, oh, well, Johnny Knoxville's character is an old man who is explaining this to his granddaughter. And it just seemed like, and I'm sure this was the case, that they just wanted to put Johnny Knoxville in that stupid grandpa makeup that they always did in Jackass. And in, I think, what was it, Bad Grandpa or whatever that movie was called. So that I just felt like that was just an excuse to do that again, which probably right there. And yeah, I do enjoy the Jackass movies. If you just, I mean, you really have to just completely shut your brain off and just enjoy that they're just doing stupid shit. And I did watch the show occasionally. I laughed pretty hard. There was a stunt that they did where they did jousting on BMX bikes, and I always thought that was really funny. But that's pretty much all I remember from Jackass. But yeah, those movies were fun if you shut your brain off. But this one, I mean, Johnny Knoxville is not a good actor at all. So yeah, when you're in a movie with The Rock and The Rock is a better actor, then you're not a very good actor.
Yeah, so, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, I don't know what the point was except for to cash in on the Jackass name while actually not being a product of Jackass. So it felt really cheap, and obviously it was not well done. So, like you mentioned, there's a lot of other movies that came out this weekend. I know you're planning to talk about one. I really wish I would have seen one of those instead, but again, for whatever reason, the most local theater to me wasn't showing them. So on that note, I will throw it over to you.
Yeah, so like you said, I saw one of the other movies that you listed, Upgrade, which is written and directed by a guy named Lee Wanell, which I guarantee you that I did not pronounce that right. He is Adam. Like the thing that he's known from my perspective is he's Adam from the original Saw movie, which he also co-wrote with James Wan, who of course ended up directing that movie as well. But he wrote and directed this movie, which is a futuristic sci-fi thriller. It stars Logan Marshall Green, who is, as far as I'm concerned, best known as the scientist boyfriend in Prometheus. He and his wife get in a car accident, and as they're waiting for the ambulance to get there, they are basically jumped, and in this altercation, he is left paralyzed and she is shot and killed, which I don't think is too big of a spoiler because it happens within like the first 10-15 minutes of the movie, and that kind of jump starts the plot. Essentially, his name in this movie, and this movie has this weird thing, and I don't know if they were trying to go with like, oh, people in the future are going to have stupid names, but his name is Gray. For a long time during this movie, it probably took me about halfway through this movie before I realized his name was actually Gray and not Greg, because that's a normal name for somebody to have. And I just assumed they were saying Greg. They were saying Gray, and her name is, and let me make sure I'm getting, Asha is her name, the wife's name in this movie. And they say it a bunch of times. And again, it took me a while before I realized they were saying Asha and not like Ashley, because that's a normal name. And so she is shot and killed. And apparently he knows some like tech genius, because of course he would, because he's a stupid mechanic. Like literally, Gray has a buddy who is like a tech genius, and he created this new software chip thing that he can put in the back of his neck. Oh, I forgot to, did I mention that he's paralyzed because of this? I don't remember if I mentioned that, because that's important. So
I don't know. I wasn't listening, man.
Yeah, of course, per usual. And so he's paralyzed. Gray or Greg is paralyzed, and his tech genius buddy puts his chip in his spinal cord, and now he can walk. And essentially it's an AI who he can talk to, but he's the only one that can hear, called STEM. So essentially, as one would, he is using this technology to track down the people that left him paralyzed and killed his wife. And obviously the movie goes from there. So I didn't really know what to expect from this movie. It looked cool from the trailers, and it's very, very cool. I enjoyed it quite a lot. The futuristic part of this movie isn't overwhelming. They do have some really cool stuff in there, like the car accident they get into. It's like an automated car, so a self-driving car, and they have a lot of like cool technology, like tablets and stuff like that. But it's not overwhelming. Like, it's not super unrealistic as far as the future tech in this movie. But what really blew me away was just the way that they shot the film, just the way that when he basically when he lets STEM take over, it's really cool the way that they shoot the movie and kind of do jump cuts and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. It's kind of funny because I just recently watched a movie that you had talked about when it first came out a couple of years ago called Hardcore Henry. I just recently watched that for the first time, I think like last week. And Upgrade is what I wanted that movie to be. Because once you kind of strip away the POV kind of gimmick in Hardcore Henry, the story sucks. It's really boring, and it lost me about like 30 minutes into that movie, and I just didn't care. I literally could not tell you what happens in that movie because I was barely paying attention, because that movie was garbage. Like, once you get away from the POV, which was really cool to watch for the first about 15 minutes, then after that I didn't care about what was happening. This Upgrade is what I wanted that movie to be. Like, it gives you enough of the character development where you actually start caring about these characters. And then once the actual like sci-fi thriller part starts to kick in, because you care about these characters, it's really, really cool. There are a lot of cool twists and turns towards the end. There's one that I actually kind of caught me off guard. Like, I actually didn't see coming. There was a couple of them were a little bit predictable. You kind of saw coming, but for the most part, I was kind of on the edge of my seat. I really enjoyed it. I will say one nitpick that I have, other than the weird names, is the fact that Logan Marshall Green, it took me a second to remember his name, I don't know if he's just naturally an ugly crier or if he's just not a very good actor, because there was a couple of scenes where he had to cry, and it was really, like, I had to look away. There's some really gruesome parts in this movie, but the worst part is to watch him cry. He's a super ugly crier, and that was very cringeworthy. So basically that was not my only nitpick. It does kind of drag a little bit right before you get into the third act. But other than those two things, I think it's a phenomenal movie, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone that's interested in like a sci-fi thriller.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this. I'm pretty sure it's Blumhouse, right?
Yes, Blumhouse Tilt. I don't know if that is different than, or if that's just a weird like hipster thing that they've been doing, calling their movies tilts. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I also like Lee Wannell or whatever you say. Like, you know, he was a big part of that first Saw movie, which I think is amazing. And I know that he's been a part of the Insidious series as well. And I've never seen any of those movies. I know you didn't like the first one, but yeah, I think that he's a talented guy, and I thought this movie looked interesting. So whenever I have the opportunity to see it, I plan on giving it a watch.
For sure. Yeah, it was funny. Hard for me to... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I didn't believe you around Hardcore Henry, because I could have swore I saw that movie with you when we reviewed it, but then I went back through my notes, and you were right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I remembered that I didn't see that movie, because I wouldn't have seen that movie and then see again. Like, why would I do that? I literally could not tell you what happens in that movie because I stopped paying attention about 20, 30 minutes in tops because that movie is boring as shit once you get away from the POV stuff. Yeah, but it was really hard for me to see this movie. I mean, we've talked about this before. One good thing about Evansville is there's quite a few theaters, but only one was showing this movie, which I thought was weird.
Which one?
It was the East Side Showplace.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, AMC wasn't showing. Like, AMC is usually the one that shows these types of movies, so I was very surprised. It is super, uber violent, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but, I mean, so is every other horror movie that comes out, and almost every single theater in Evansville shows those, so I'm not quite sure what the deal was. I mean, there was quite a few people, a lot more people than I thought there was going to be in this movie. I seriously, I mean, I got there a little early because I wanted to get something to eat while I was there. But when I first got there, I was the only one that had signed into this movie. So, which I was nervous that my movie pass card wasn't going to work because that app sucks. And it said that I'd already seen this movie. And I basically had to have the same argument with Movie Pass that I just had with you. Pretty sure I would remember if I saw a movie. But, it did work. It did let me check in, but I was the first person to actually like check in to this movie because you get to pick your seats when you get your ticket. But as it started getting closer to the movies, a good, I would say 10, 15 people piled into this movie, which I assumed I was going to be seeing it by myself.
Yeah, I think that, we've talked a lot about MoviePass on this podcast and we've sung its praises, and obviously a lot more people have MoviePass now because it's only $10 a month. So obviously they're not a sponsor of us, and I feel like with all the praise we've given them, we should probably also throw out there that they're fucking garbage most of the time. Like yeah,
it's gone to shit, man, for sure.
Yeah, I explained to you last week that I wasn't able to see Deadpool 2. Like, I won't get into the specifics, but basically because their fucking app sucks and their customer service blows, I wasn't able to use my movie pass to see Deadpool 2. So, then again, my movie pass or my movie ticket to Action Point last night was $11. So I already made my money back for Movie Pass by using it for that. So like, it works itself out, but just whenever something goes wrong, the way they handle it is so shitty. Like, what a piece of shit company.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely gone to shit for sure. Like, as soon as I went to click on it, it like had this little error message. It was like, oh, you've already seen this movie. Like, no, I haven't. So I clicked out of it, and it said that I had checked in for it, and I had to walk to the theater and like not knowing if it was going to scan my card or not. But it approved it, and it let me take the picture and all that good stuff. So I was good to go. But there was a good 5 minutes right there that I did not think it was going to work, and I was going to be super pissed because you had mentioned your previous experience with their customer service, so I assumed that it wasn't going to work out in my favor if the card got declined.
Yeah, fuck them.
Yeah, for sure. So our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two a week. So what'd you read this week?
I read Man of Steel #1, which is the first big thing that Brian Michael Bendis has written for DC Comics since he switched over from Marvel Comics. And obviously, anytime I talk about the character of Superman, I have to preface it with the opinion that Pat and I have around the character, which is that we think he is a weak character to read because of how strong he is and how he has no weaknesses. However, I'm going to throw it out there that the more I read Superman when it's written by a good author like Bendis or Scott Snyder, and, as I read these stories that they've done with this character currently and in the past, the more I'm changing my tune and my thoughts around Superman. So this book definitely feels like a fresh start for the character. And honestly, it kind of is. Not only is it Brian Michael Bendis that's writing it, but Ivan Rice is drawing the comic. And then they also have a new editor at DC Comics for the character. So it's kind of a super fresh creative team that's putting this out. And if you can't tell by now, I definitely loved this comic quite a bit, and the direction that Bendis seems to be going with it that's promised in issue 1. I will say, as I started to read this issue, I was a little nervous as I dug in, because it starts with a flashback to Krypton and a big alien threat. And for me, that's what I really dislike about the character, the alien and the cosmic aspect. There's always something from Krypton's past that's a big threat that's coming to Earth to get Superman or to, destroy Earth or whatever. And that's kind of boring to me. But my worries were alleviated throughout the rest of the issue. What this first issue is basically it's a character study of Superman. We see him apprehend Killer Moth and Firefly, which are notable Batman villains. And there's some funny banter and funny dialogue between the three characters. And then we also see him save a child from a burning building, and Superman's inner monologue, and then, just as himself, and then the dialogue we see that he has with the public as Superman, and then the dialogue we see he has with his coworkers and family as Clark Kent really hits the nail on the head for the character for me. I thought that was really well written. It's funny because I read this interview with Brian Michael Bendis recently where he talked about how happy and fortunate he was to be writing a character that stands for hope in a time where so many people need it. And I could definitely feel that enthusiasm and mindset as I read the comic. I'm definitely excited to see like where Bendis is going with this character and what he's planning to do. I know that after these 6 issues of Man of Steel, I think he's taking over Action Comics and Superman. So he definitely is going to have a lot on his plate. But like I said, you can just tell that he's genuinely having fun with the character and with the story, and that he genuinely cares about it. And I think that when somebody's as passionate about something like that, that it comes across in their work, that it's just honestly fun to read. So I know that I'm probably not going to be able to convince you that this is a book that's worth your time because of how you feel about the character. But for those of you out there that do enjoy Superman, like I think that this is probably one of the freshest versions and the freshest stories that's been done with the character in quite a long time. Again, because there's just new blood and there's new enthusiasm, and it comes across on the page.
Oh yeah, you're not going to convince me to read this book because I checked out as soon as you said that you read Man of Steel #1.
I mean, you check out whenever I open my mouth, so.
Yeah, pretty much. As a general rule, that's kind of my default setting. As soon as you start talking, I'm just waiting for you to stop talking. I'm like, oh, okay, he stopped talking. It's my turn now. No, yeah, I think the character can be interesting if he's written by a good writer. But I mean, you could say that about any character, really, because I mean, if they're written by a shitty writer, like if I decided to start. And I don't know why DC would let me write for Superman, then it would be garbage stories because I'm not a good writer. But if you have a good writer, I know we talked about this a lot. Max Landis did a miniseries called American Alien for a while, and that was really good. So I think that when you have a talented writer like a Scott Snyder I'm not completely sold on Bendis. I think he's done some weird shit with Marvel, but for the most part, he's obviously a talented guy. I think you have those good writers on these big characters that can only help.
Yeah, for sure, man. Exactly what I just said. Good
So
stuff.
I was listening.
No, you weren't listening. We're just on the same wavelength and you regurgitated what I said. No, I'm kidding. So what did you read this week?
I read Lando, Double or Nothing, #1. So when we reviewed Solo, I mentioned that one of my favorite parts of that movie was Donald Glover's performance as a young Lando. And he's a character that, I mean, obviously isn't in the original trilogy too much, but he's a character that people have kind of attached themselves to, and Donald Glover did an amazing job. The best part of that movie by far. So I was definitely interested in seeing whether or not it was good because Donald Glover is good, or if it was good because I'm interested in the character. It turns out, well, if I'm just judging by Solo and just judging by this comic book, I would say that it's almost entirely because Donald Glover is really charismatic and just amazing as a character, because his book did not interest me one bit. Like, I got a couple of pages in, and I was just like, I gotta finish it. Like, I have to, because it's a number one, and I have to talk about something for the podcast. But yeah, it wasn't great. I've talked about this before with the Star Wars comic. I really appreciate how they will take characters that we love, like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, like all the big ones from the Star Wars universe, and they use those characters to expand the universe. Because if you just have a Star Wars comic book that exists in this universe, but you don't ever see the characters that we really care about, let's just say if they had a Star Wars equivalent of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like, we're not going to care about that comic book because, yeah, it happens in Star Wars universe, but we don't care about these characters. So I think the book does a really good job of using the characters that we do care about and expanding the universe. So we eventually start caring about these other characters because they're interacting with the characters that we grew up with. Well, with Lando, not necessarily a character that I really care that much about, apparently, and it was pretty much all Donald Glover in Solo. So when that kind of wore off on me, when I was a few pages into this book, I was just like, I really don't care about what's happening in the book because I don't care about these other characters. And it's a pretty much generic story, essentially, because he's a smuggler, as you might imagine. Somebody needs something smuggled, and so he's hired to smuggle this thing. I believe it's a mini series, so I think it's like 5 or 6 issues, and obviously this is issue 1. I'm not going to continue with this book because I'm pretty sure I know exactly where it's going. It's going to follow the same paces that most of these books do. So I'm not gonna keep reading this book. I would suggest anybody that's vaguely interested in Donald Glover as Lando, then just wait. If they do a sequel to that movie, then just wait for that, because this book is not going to satisfy you.
Yeah, I know that last week when we reviewed Solo, we talked about, is there oversaturation with these Star Wars movies? And I mean, that's a debate that I think that a lot of people are having right now. But the one thing that I will say is I think that there's definitely an oversaturation with Star Wars comics. It seems like every week there's a different number one Star Wars comic that comes out focusing on a different character. And it's just, obviously they're not all going to be good, and it's a bit exhausting. So I'm glad that I'm not trying to be a completionist with these Star Wars comics, because there's just too many right now. So it doesn't surprise me that this one in particular doesn't add a lot of value. It's definitely a cash in on Solo and on Donald Glover's Lando. So I definitely won't be reading it.
And I don't know why I expected anything different, because honestly, they tried a Lando miniseries years ago, and I bought the first issue, and then it sat on my shelf for years before I actually read it. Literally years. So obviously that should have answered my question about whether or not I was interested in the character at all.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so what's nerd news this week?
All right, so a few different things. We'll just dive right in. So this first one, I felt like I had to bring it up because this was something that I talked about on the podcast this year, and I obviously stood up for this show, and now I want to put my 2 cents in on what happened, and that, of course, is what happened this week with the show Roseanne. So it got
Please
canceled.
Tell me. I was going to say, I wasn't aware. I'd never heard about this.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, everybody knows what happens. It got canceled because she's a racist piece of shit. So what I will say is, I mean, it deserved to be canceled. I mean, it sucks that so many people lost their job that worked on that show and didn't share the same viewpoints as her and weren't mentally ill like she is. But at the end of the day, like, ABC has to distance themselves from that kind of behavior and those kinds of comments. So it absolutely deserved to be canceled. Obviously, I stood up for the show whenever I talked about its return for what I was into back in March. So, I don't think a show should be canceled because of somebody's political views. And I thought that they actually handled like the difference of opinion within the family pretty well on that show. And that's like I said, whenever I talked about it, something that's prevalent in a lot of American families, including my own. But when you get on Twitter and you say something dumb that's racist, like, your show deserves to be canceled. So yeah, it's unfortunate that so many people lost their jobs, especially with, you know, the cast that was mostly liberal and a lot of crew that didn't share those viewpoints. But at the end of the day, like, you just got to cut the cord whenever your star and the person that the show's named after is a piece of shit like that. So good riddance.
Yeah, so I obviously don't care about the show at all. I'm glad that a piece of shit like her doesn't have a platform anymore, that she'll fade away like she should have been doing before. I will say that I was not happy that the show got canceled. I mean, I'm happy because I didn't want her to have a show to begin with, because she seemed like a piece of shit before any of this happened. But I don't like the hypocritical, oh, well, this person has been saying and doing weird shit for years, we can profit from that. But then the minute that their show is going to be, I don't know the word I'm looking for, like, when they can no longer profit from it, when people are outraged by something that that person says, oh, now we're going to cut the cord, but ABC has profited from her saying crazy shit before. So I just think it's a little hypocritical now. I agree with the move, but I never thought that she should have gotten her own show to begin with. But that's now neither here nor there. I'm not a fan of the show. I've watched a few episodes here and there in syndication, but I don't really care about it. So I'm glad that she'll kind of fade away now. I know that there's some talk of maybe having a spinoff. I don't think that they should do that. I think they should just cancel it and be done with it. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. They should just cancel it and be done with it. Like, nobody needs a spinoff here. It just wouldn't work without her on it, to be honest. So, yeah, I mean, people have been saying, like, free speech and stuff like that. And I mean, she's absolutely entitled to free speech, and she's absolutely to say, like, you know, able to say those things on Twitter. But, you know, if I were to say something racist, I would lose my job too. So
yeah, that's what people don't understand, is like, she cannot go to jail for saying that, but she can certainly lose her job. If I said crazy shit on Twitter, I mean, I'm sure my bosses follow me or have some way to track that. Like, I'm sure they would find out and I would get fired as well. Like, I wouldn't go to jail, but that's two different things.
Yeah, exactly. So people are ignorant and she is ignorant. So good riddance. So
for sure.
We'll move on to the next story, which I was really surprised about. And I mean, it's about a show that neither of us watch anymore, but Andrew Lincoln is going to be leaving The Walking Dead next season, I believe is when it is. So obviously he plays Rick Grimes, and he is the star of the show and the focal point of the show and the comics, and he's been around since episode 1. So that's, I mean, a big deal for the show. I mean, obviously, like I said, you and I stopped watching it. Like, it's become pretty much garbage, but yeah, that's a big thing in that universe.
Do we even know anyone that still watches this show? Like, at this point, come on. Like, I don't like to, like, oh, well, I'm smarter than, like, you shouldn't be watching the show anymore or whatever. You're not a smart TV viewer or whatever, but I don't want to be like hipster, whatever, but I mean, come on, this show is really bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, obviously there are people that still watch the show. I mean, it gets millions of viewers. I don't know anyone personally that talks about it or is invested in it anymore. But yeah, it's just it was surprising to me to see that. I know that I believe Lauren Cohan is leaving as well, who plays Maggie. So at this point, it's just the Daryl show, I guess. So. Oh, well,
yeah, I don't know. Like, I always said, and I'm going to sound like a douchebag on this too, but I always said, like, the comics are a lot better than the show anyways, and I'm not going to let the show, when I started to kind of distance myself from the show a little bit, the last couple of seasons that I watched, like, I was like, I'm not going to let the show affect how I feel about the comics, but I haven't read the comics in a while either. I'm just kind of over the whole thing.
Yeah, it's definitely oversaturated and not interesting anymore. So, all right, last story is that Jamie Foxx has been cast as Spawn in Todd McFarlane's Spawn movie. So there you go. There's your Spawn.
Yeah, so I remember, and I don't know why my parents ever let me do this, but I remember my brother and I went and saw the Spawn movie, the original, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, even as a kid, I didn't know really anything about the character because I wasn't in the comics. I mean, I read a Spider-Man comic every once in a while when that movie came out, but like I wasn't into the comics. I don't even think I knew that he was even based on a comic. I just thought it was, I saw the action figures, and that I think that's the only way that I even knew that Spawn existed. And that movie is batshit crazy. And even as a kid, like I was like, oh, the action's cool, but this movie's fucking crazy. And I think I saw it a couple of times, like on like Showtime or whatever, like one of those movie channels. I think I watched it a couple of times after that. But I mean, that movie is really, really bad. And I don't see how they're going to make that character into a movie. Like it just, I don't know. I just don't know if there's an audience for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't really do big numbers at the box office. I don't think Spawn is a bankable character like people in our, I don't know, group think so. Like, you know, nerds love Spawn and nerds want a Spawn movie, and the people in the industry probably think that it's going to, you know, bring a lot of people to the theater, but I don't think that mainstream audiences are as interested in Spawn as we all think they are. So hopefully there's not a huge budget involved. The one thing that I will say is it's pretty cool that Todd McFarlane's doing it, since Spawn is his baby and he's the creator. So that gives me hope. But I mean, I'm not a huge Jamie Foxx fan, and I can't imagine he's going to bring much to the character. So yeah, I mean, of course, I'm sure we'll see this movie, and it'll probably be a movie we review on the podcast. But you know, this is also a movie that would be made for people like us, not necessarily like, you know, the average moviegoer. So I can't imagine it's going to do big box office numbers.
No, I had actually forgotten about it. Like every once in a while, a story will creep up about it, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's right, they're doing that. And I just assumed that it would just never get made. And then they just announced, obviously, that Jamie Foxx got cast, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, they're still doing that. I'm not crazy. Like, I mean, I guess it makes sense. He's probably the biggest name they could have gotten for a Spawn movie at this point. But, I mean, we've already seen him in superhero movies, so he's not good. So, I mean, I think he's good when the material is great. I don't think that he necessarily raises mediocre material. He's not that kind of performer. So, hopefully this is really good material. I can't imagine it will be, but hopefully it's a really good material, because he is going to be garbage if not.
Yeah, I mean, he has a few great movies like Ray and Django Unchained and Booty Call. No, you know, I think that he's average. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, obviously he was good as Ray Charles, and obviously he's great in Django Unchained, but then you have him as Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he's just off the charts. So it really depends on the writing and the directing to be really great to get a good performance out of him. And as much as I respect Todd McFarlane, I don't know that he's going to be the guy to do that. So I guess
for sure.
All right, man. That's all I have for Nerd News.
All right. So our main topic this episode, if this is your first episode, this next segment we just call our main topic because it changes from episode to episode. We generally review a lot of movies, but this week, other than the two movies that we talked about what we're into, there wasn't like that big movie that we normally would review this time of year. But one of my favorite shows of all time had a new, I guess, part 1 of their new season just released a few days ago. Arrested Development released part 1 of their season 5. It was 8 episodes, so in total the whole season, once they release the second part, will be 16 episodes. So we just, it feels like we just talked about this show a couple of weeks ago, because they just released, or I guess re-released, season 4 recut, and we reviewed that when it was first released. So, we just did talk about Arrested Development. So, yeah, we neither one of us really liked the season 4 remix, and I was definitely, I had mixed feelings about season 5 just because I wanted to get the bad taste out of my mouth from season 4, but also I was just kind of nervous because I felt like they were kind of digging themselves deeper and deeper, and I was hoping that, well, if they just stop while they're somewhat ahead, maybe I won't hate this show. Like, I don't ever want to see myself hating this show. So, I was afraid that they could have dug themselves even a little bit deeper with season 5. So I was hoping that they could end on a high note, because I'm assuming this will end up being the last season once we get the second part. But yeah, I was a little bit nervous at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the boat I was in, is that season 4 wasn't great. And part of what made that season not great is that they didn't actually get the cast together that much, and they told separate stories, and it was a lot of the cast members talking to each other on the phone or green screen or those kinds of things because they couldn't get everybody together. And season 5 promised to not really be that as much. Like, you know, the promotional materials and interview with the cast and director and creator said that, you know, they were able to get everybody together last fall to film. So I was really looking forward to that. And like you said, hopefully kind of getting back to the glory of the first 3 seasons of Arrested Development. So yeah, I mean, I was definitely looking forward to it. Even just being 8 episodes, like, it was something that I was, interested in binging.
For sure. So, like I said, if this is your first episode, we break down our reviews very similar to how we just break down the episode as a whole. We just have different segments. In this first segment, we just like to start off with kind of a general overview of whatever we're reviewing. Obviously, in this case, it will be Arrested Development Season 5, Part 1. That is quite the mouthful. We start off with broad strokes. So how'd you feel about this new season of Arrested Development?
So obviously, like we just said, we had pretty high hopes here, and overall, it ended up being pretty disappointing. Is it bad? No. I would definitely say there were parts of this half season that I liked, and there were parts that I laughed at for sure. It was definitely better than Action Point. However, I
feel
definitely
like that's a diss.
Yeah, it is. I definitely feel like season 4 of this show put these characters into a rut. And instead of like starting fresh with season 5, like they could have done, we instead see the continuation of those stories, and the characters never really get out of that rut. And at this point, I think that the show is a novelty, and it was the novelty, like I said, of getting the actors back together again that really sold the show, and not necessarily the telling of creative, hilarious stories like what we used to see with it. So, you know, they sold it to us with like the nostalgia factor, but in the end, it really just didn't deliver like we expect Arrested Development to.
So I agree with you. I wouldn't go quite as far as saying that I was disappointed with this, because my bar was set a lot lower than I would have guessed it would have been, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. But I don't necessarily know if they could have done what you wanted them to do, just the way that they tell stories and the way that this show has always been formatted. Like, the great thing about this show, at least through the first 3 seasons, is the fact that they never give up on a joke, or they never give up on they always constantly do callbacks. And that was one thing that we talked about with season 4, is when you do a joke and then you keep calling back to it. Well, if the joke originally wasn't funny, then the callbacks, you're going to get those diminishing returns no matter how funny the joke was to begin with. So when it wasn't funny to begin with, the callbacks don't really work, obviously. So I don't know if they could have necessarily just done a fresh start, because they couldn't necessarily, just the way that they've told stories in the past, I don't think they could have just said, oh, well, season 4 doesn't exist and we're just going to start afresh. I think that they kind of had to go where they were going. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. Obviously, we'll get into the story aspect here in a little bit. I definitely think that it's a step in the right direction. And by that, I mean, it's a step closer to what you would see in the first, second, and third season versus the fourth season. Even just obviously the style is definitely the same because they have the whole cast together, but just the jokes are funnier. Like, thank God the jokes are funnier. It's not quite as funny as the first couple of seasons, but I definitely laughed. I think I laughed. There was one episode, and we'll talk about it later, but there was one episode early in the season where I laughed more in that episode than I think I did in the last about maybe 6 or 7 of the season 4 remix. Just in that one episode. So I felt like this was definitely a step in the right direction. But I think as writers and creators, I think they're just kind of running on fumes with these particular characters. And I think you see that a lot in this season.
Yeah, it's funny that it's only season 5 of this show, yet it feels like it's dragged on forever at this point.
For sure. So let's just jump right into the story. So with season 4, I have a hard time not harping back to it because it literally, we just watched it a couple of weeks ago. But with season 4, it was almost like 60-40 in favor of the stuff that I didn't like. Like, there was so many different stories that barely intertwined, that even with the remix and you didn't have to watch all those boring stories all in big chunks, it still didn't really capture my attention. And I think that they were able to flip the percentage or the ratio or whatever in season 5. I think it's 60-40 in favor of the stuff that I did like. But it's still not quite perfect. I think the maybe stuff is really, really piss poor. I did not care. If she wasn't with George Michael, I did not care about the Stan Sitwell weird shit that she did. I mean, other than the gag where he made her touch his penis, other than that, I did not laugh when she was on screen, I think, at all. So that was very disappointing. I think the Tobias stuff really started off strong, especially when he was jumping back and forth between who he was going to play in their little family commercial thing. I thought that was really funny. So it started off strong, but his arc in the season really went downhill fast. I didn't think the Murphy Brown stuff was needed. Kyle Mooney was just basically Kyle Mooney from SNL in this show, and I did not like his character. I thought the Buster thing had its moments. I thought that whenever you saw him in prison and he had a different thing on his mechanical hand, I thought that was kind of funny. I didn't really like the George Sr. stuff. That didn't really interest me. But the Michael stuff was a lot stronger in this season than it was in season 4. But you couldn't get a whole lot weaker with that particular character.
Yeah, I think that we have opposite feelings about the comedy in this season. And I don't want to get too much into it because I know that we'll get into it later in the review. And spoiler alert, my nerd favorite's going to deal with some of the gags in this season, but I really hated the Tobias stuff, especially him jumping around playing different members of the family. I thought that was terrible, but I really liked Maybe as Annette and the old folks.
Wow.
I thought that was funny. So.
Maybe Brittany's rubbing off on you a little bit because that was real stupid.
No, it was funny, man. Her big teeth. That was good stuff. So, I mean, as far as the story goes, like I appreciate that it seems like the showrunners, including Mitch Hurwitz, noticed what was wrong with season 4 and tried to avoid the same mistakes in this season, most notably that they got all of the cast together again for most of the episodes. I mean, that's what this show is about, right? Is these characters and actors working off of each other. So I'm glad they found to rectify that part of the problem from season 4. However, like I mentioned in broad strokes, this show still feels like it's caught in a rut to me. With so much time between seasons, I don't see why they couldn't have put more focus on the writing with all of the time they had. I know that you kind of took as what I said in broad strokes as me saying start over or just hit the reset button. And I don't necessarily think that that's what I wanted from it, but I don't think that you need to have like the tongue-in-cheek references that the cast has aged, but this picks up right off of season 4. Like, I don't see this decision-making there Like, I don't get what they were going for. Like, Michael Cera looks like a 50-year-old man at this point. Like, it's
yeah,
not,
but they make a joke about that too.
yeah, they make a joke about it, but it doesn't rectify anything. Like, it's not funny.
I mean, they can't do anything about it.
Like,
I mean, they can either acknowledge it like they did, or they could just ignore it.
Yeah.
And I like that they acknowledged it.
It happened 5 years ago, man. Just like have a 5-year jump and show us like this show loves its flashbacks. Show us in flashbacks what happened.
I don't think that you can end the season like they did with the remix, with him punching him in the face, and that not be a major part of this season.
It wasn't even a major part of this season, though.
Their relationship is a major part of this season.
I mean, I feel like they're doing the same stuff they were doing in season 4. Like, they literally bring back Rebel Alley. Like, they're stuck in a rut. Just fucking wrap it up.
So you didn't like the Ron Howard stuff. I don't like the character of Rebel Alley. I don't care for that character. I didn't really care for her in season 4. I do kind of have a crush at the particular actress that plays her, but that wore off pretty, wore off pretty quickly, mostly because of the red hair. I mean, I have a crush on Ron Howard too, because of the red hair. But did you like the Ron Howard stuff? Because I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to blow my load here because I'm going to talk about that in one of my notable episodes. I just think that it felt like a retread of some of the season 4 stuff. I mean, I definitely still think that there are some funny storylines throughout these 8 episodes, and there are moments and threads that are really enjoyable. But just other stuff was not great. Like Lindsay's political campaign, like that was super lame, especially with the Trump tie-ins, and it's bad that they couldn't even get Portia de la Rossi, or however you say her name, for most of the season. Like there's literally parts where she has a sheet over her head.
Yeah.
Because she's kind of retired from acting and I guess agreed to come back and do things minimally. It's just, I mean, at that point, you just kind of close the curtains on the show, right? Like it's getting kind of sad to watch in some parts.
I think it was sad to watch 4th season. I think they definitely, and I would agree, and I'm glad that you brought it up, that it is surprising that they couldn't come up with better ideas. Because I'm not saying that these are great ideas. I would even probably put season 3 over season 5. And I wasn't a huge fan even when it first came out. I wasn't a huge fan of season 3. Of the original 3 seasons, it's clearly the worst one. But I was surprised that they couldn't come up with better ideas after they had been given so much time. Like, I don't agree with the decision to bring it back like they did with season 4 if you couldn't get everybody together. Like, I think they were just appeasing a lot of people, and of course they wanted to make money. They obviously wanted to make the show because they never wanted it to be canceled in the first place. But they felt like this was the only way that they were going to be able to make the show. But when you know that you're going to get the cast together again, and you had years in between this, why you couldn't have rectified the things that you had happened in season 4 because of the way that you had to shoot it, you don't have better ideas to rectify it. I was a little bit disappointed in that. I don't know if I'm necessarily as strong, obviously, as you are in the negative. I still thought that it was pretty funny, and I liked that they brought everybody together, and it felt like more of Arrested Development that I loved. But yeah, it is a little disappointing that they couldn't quite come up with something better.
I agree.
All right, so let's just kind of go over the performances just real quick, like we always say. It seems like we could just like have a recording of one of us saying, well, these actors have been playing these characters for years now, and they've got it down, and then we could just move on. Because that's pretty much how I felt. I didn't really like Kyle Mooney, but he's not really in this show that much. I will say that maybe whoever plays her, and she has a weird name. I can't remember what her name is. Her tattoos were kind of distracting, but obviously that wasn't her performance at all. And I don't think she's a very good actress to begin with. But Michael Cera has not aged well, but he was always a goofy guy anyways. I think that he's fine as George Michael. I wish his arc was a little bit better, but he was always kind of one of my favorite characters from the first 2 seasons. And the the kind of the revival has not done that character justice so far. But, yeah, I think everybody did just fine.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Like, same old, same old.
All right, so on to the comedy. I think this is where we're obviously going to disagree because I think we thought completely opposites on what we thought was funny. I don't want to blow my load for Nerd Favorite now that I know what Nerd Favorite is, because there's a one particular joke and it's really stupid. Like, I will admit that it's a stupid joke, and we'll get to it here a little bit, but it's a Tobias joke, and most of Tobias jokes are pretty stupid. But just the fact that he made fun of a character, and I never noticed that character did that thing. And his joke about that. Okay, well, I'm not going to say it. So, but yes, I thought that this season was a lot funnier than the other season that we just watched.
I don't. I laughed more in season 4 than I did in season 5.
Really? What about season 4 was funny? Like, so, I felt like somebody was doing an Arrested Development impersonation in season 4.
So let me
felt more like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, let me preface that there were also 22 episodes of season 4. So I laughed more, but it was spread out across 22 episodes, and this is only 8 episodes. So, you know, whenever the second half of season 5 comes out, like, I'll be happy to go back and say, like, okay, which is better, season 4 or season 5? But, like, even thinking back to some of the threads of season 4 makes me giggle. Like, the stuff we talked, like, you know, Daddy needs to get his rocks off. Like George Michael living in the house amongst all of the sexual predators. You know, Job struggling with his sexuality in that season was funny to me. And like the whole, like I mentioned when we reviewed season 4, like the bit of him doing like the Christian magician stuff. Like there was just stuff that I think back to and it makes me laugh. But that being said, again, that was all spread out over 22 episodes, and this is like 8 episodes. So, again, I'll kind of say which one's better whenever we review the second half when it comes out later this year. But if I'm weighing laughs versus laughs, I laughed more in season 4.
Yeah, I feel completely the opposite. I felt like I was, both of these seasons, as sad as it is to say, I checked out a lot during both of these seasons, but I felt like I was a lot more checked out in the 4th season. And again, we watched 22 episodes once they recut it, and we watched it within a week or so. So yes, and maybe in retrospect, when the second half of this season comes out, maybe I'll say the same thing, but it felt like I was more into this season, or at least this part of season 5, than I ever was in season 4, even after they recut it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like, I think we're arguing about 2 very average seasons of TV on which one is just slightly better than average. Like, at the end of the day, like, it's not what we deserve with an Arrested Development TV show for either season.
For sure. All right, so we didn't do this with our season 4 remix. We normally, when we review TV shows, we will point out a couple of notable episodes. With this one, with this season, for me, I'll just be upfront. It's hard for me to do that because the show, like, I like certain threads, and the threads will go throughout the entire season. So it's kind of hard for me to pick out a 1 or 2 episodes and like, oh yeah, that's the episode that I like, because I really just kind of like the arcs. So I will say the earlier Tobias stuff, like I said earlier, is really funny to me. I did enjoy him jumping back and forth, trying to play different characters or different people in the family. I did think that was really funny. The fact that he dyed his facial hair is really funny to me. His sideburns and his mustache, I thought that was really funny. And then I liked the Ron Howard stuff. I thought that particular episode, his family, I guess, reunion or whatever, his little barbecue thing, I thought that was pretty solid stuff. So I don't know what episodes those were, because like I said, I'm more into the threads and the arcs than necessarily episodes with the Arrested Development, but I did enjoy those 2 things the most.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we would have coordinated before this, because I thought you said we were going to pick out episodes at the end, and I didn't whenever I prepped this. So I was like scrambling to find episodes, and it doesn't sound like you picked out episodes either. So we probably
well,
could have.
I guess the Ron Howard one, I just didn't write down which episode that was.
I mean, we probably could have avoided that altogether, and I won't get too much into the Ron Howard episode, but I because I'm going to talk about it in Nerd Favorite, but I did like that episode. So if we're going to just do like threads, I guess I would say a thread that I really liked was Job. Like, I still like the Job stuff, him struggling with his sexuality and like buying a closet store and like coming up with that magic. Like that, all of that is really funny to me. Just because to watch that character struggle with that and, doubt himself and those types of things and basically come out to three guys that work at a closet store because he thinks that their job is to turn gay people straight, was funny to me. If I had to pick out like an episode or a thread I didn't like, there was an episode where George Sr. drives to Mexico and Michael follows him and George Michael doesn't believe him. So he follows his dad. Like that whole episode was kind of dumb to me. So that would be something I didn't like.
Yeah. And I honestly, that was one thread from season 4. And I know we keep bringing it up. The Mexico stuff just didn't interest me with George Sr. and Oscar. And then that episode that you just mentioned ties in a lot to that. So yeah, I agree with you there. I didn't really particularly like that. So unless you had anything else, I guess we could go ahead and give it a star rating out of 5 stars.
Sure. I'm giving it a 3.
Wow. So yeah, I'm also giving it a 3, which it seems silly because I definitely seemed a lot more positive with it, but I mean, it's not a great season of television. Like we said, I would definitely put season 3 over it, and then season 1 and 2 are in their own tier for me.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody was like, hey, I love Arrested Development and I've seen every episode, should I watch this season? Like, yeah, I'm going to tell them to watch it. So
for sure.
That's kind of my thought process there. So.
All right. So let's just jump in to a Nerd Favorite. I know what you're going to ask. What our favorite gag from this season.
I was going to copy off of you from whenever we did season 4 and just say, what's your favorite gag? So mine, like I said, whenever we were talking about notable episodes or notable threads, and it sounds like you like this too, was the Ron Howard barbecue, the Howard family barbecue, where they all have obviously they're all redheaded, and then George Michael tries to dye his hair pink, but it comes out red. I like that for a lot of reasons. Like, there's a lot of just little jokes in there that make me laugh just thinking about it, like how Ron Howard always says things are neat. And, Bryce Dallas Howard is in that episode. And I think that like his legitimate children are in there along with the made up Rebel Alley character, which I think is funny. But I think one of my favorite parts is that Rance Howard is just like in that room I think that scene ends with him saying something racist. So like he's a racist old man, and I'm glad that he could like have a sense of humor about himself. Unfortunately, he's like passed away since that was, since it was filmed. But I just think that whole sequence is pretty funny, and like that the family's so smitten that George Michael would dye his hair red. Like it just makes me smile thinking about it.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite episode of the whole season. The particular joke that I think I laughed the most, and I'm not proud of this, but I already said that it's a pretty dumb joke, but it made me laugh really hard. So it was early in the season where Tobias is kind of jumping around between the family members of who he's going to play in this little commercial thing that they're doing. And of course he was set to play Michael at first. And the big thing with Michael is he's always leaving, but he's always going to come back. And so he's like imitating that. And, at one point he says I can't remember exactly what he says, but basically is that he always comes back and he always has his hands in his pockets. And then he goes, what do you got, peanuts in there? And I don't know why I thought that was so fucking funny. I was literally in tears laughing so hard. Like, what do you got, peanuts in there? And I don't know why, but I realized in that moment that he really does have his hands in his pockets a lot. And I just thought that was really funny that they would make fun of the character like that. Man, it just made me laugh so hard. That's stupid fucking joke, but I really enjoyed it. And then they bring it back a little bit later, I think in that same episode. And, I was like, and then it reminded me, and I just started laughing all over again. So that is my favorite joke from the episode, or the entire first part of season 5.
So that's the thing that made you laugh the most, and then you talked very highly of season 5. Yet that was the funniest joke, was you got peanuts in there.
Yeah, again, stupid fucking joke, but I really laughed hard. I mean, that was the hardest I laughed. And honestly, I think I might have said this to you before we started recording. I laughed harder in that episode and at that part than I think I did at any moment from season 4 remix. And now, to be fair, I had already seen season 4 a couple of times when it originally aired. So I had seen a lot of that stuff before. But when we rewatched it, when it was rebranded or whatever, I definitely laughed at that, not just that particular part, but that whole episode, more than I think I laughed in the last maybe 6, 7, 8 episodes of, season 4 remix.
Yeah, I think I laughed more at that peanuts joke when you retold it than I did whenever in the original, episode. So yeah, good stuff, man.
All right, so that's it for episode 192 of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. Again, we hope that you go to Indie PopCon. If you do, visit us at booth 1130. As always, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. You can visit our website, thenerdspodcast.com, which is basically just a hub for all of our stuff, including our YouTube channel, which I appreciate if you would comment and subscribe to that as well, the Nerds You're Looking For. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. You can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And then finally, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com, which I'm assuming is still a thing. I haven't been on there in a long time. So hopefully it is. And if it is, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
See you guys.